Hi there, and welcome to the Living with SMA podcast. We're here to have conversations about living with spinal muscular atrophy. Throughout this podcast, we will be covering lots of different topics, from preparing for university, getting the most from your personal budget, sex and relationships, and lots more. So we invite different hosts from across the SMA community to come together here. We want to answer your questions, provide you with useful tips and recommendations, and also share personal stories. So please do reach out and connect with us here at the charity SMA UK. Thank you for listening, and we hope you find the podcast useful.
Welcome to part 2 of About Toilets. We have previously covered bathrooms that are not fully accessible, the radar key scheme alongside maintaining the look standards, and multi-purpose bathrooms. Today we will be talking about gender-neutral bathrooms, policy standards, and lack of awareness.
So maybe I can pose this to Jasmine first. This week, we were myself and Ross were tagged on a comment from Isaac Harvey on LinkedIn. He was talking about bathroom facilities as well. And he was saying that in the future he would like to see bathroom spaces that are for everyone, so that the disabled bathrooms are not separate from the normal set of bathrooms that are available. Do you think that would be more better, or would you think that would complicate things a little bit?
Oh, God, I don't know. I kind of, a bit like what Ross was saying, I get stage fright too. And like you'll be sat there and you're thinking like, oh, is anyone listening? Like, can I do this? And sometimes like I just can't go. And I think like that's just normal for us. But being away from the normal toilets, that does help, because there's not people coming in and out, the doors aren't opening and closing, you're not hearing people sneeze and doing what people do in toilets. It's for me, I personally would prefer for it to be away. So I've got that, I don't know, so it's separate. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I guess the question that it poses is, do you think it would do more harm if we were integrated into a space that's used for everyone, so almost like a gender neutral space, where everyone could go with a section on the side that was maybe even completely sealed off, not like a normal booth that you would see in a normal bathroom, but just where everyone could just come and go as they please. Do you think that would do more damage, or do you think it's a good idea?
I could see pros and cons to both, if I'm honest. I can't tell you how I'd feel. I don't know, I'm afraid.
Okay.
Ross, what do you think?
That's fine.
Yeah, so I didn't like Isaac's post at all. For an influencer, it was the most uninclusive description of a toilet, because he was telling us how great this toilet was, but you wouldn't be able to like use the bath mirror, you wouldn't have got under the sink, you wouldn't have reached the toilet roll, there was no room to transfer, there was no change in places facility. So I don't even understand how it got any traction, which was interesting. So in my day job, we've had a lot of debates about gender neutral toilets, gender neutral facilities, merging it as one. So in an ideal world, there would be, if you take an office, for example, there would be, let's say, a large area on a floor that was just a series of toilet doors, and there would be and there are 4 different types of accessible toilets. So I think there's an ambulant accessible toilet, there's a accessible toilet, there's a wheelchair accessible toilet, and there's a change in places, and then I guess there's a 5th, which is just a toilet. And you just have like a range of doors, and they'd all be privately enclosed, they'd all have a sink, and everyone does their business in private. The reality is that would cost a lot of money for the space that could be used for other things. So kind of getting back round to Jasmine asking me, where do I sit on this? I wouldn't want to go through a male bathroom and have to say, excuse me, then get to the separate wheelchair enclosed space that's a change in places in the males, to find it engaged because either it's being used by another wheelchair or a disabled person or a non-disabled person, and then be just sat in the toilet going, "Hi everyone, I'm just waiting for the bathroom." Like, actually, there's sometimes something nice about, if you go to a restaurant and you go to the accessible bathroom and it's kind of a bit out of the way, and you might be waiting for somebody else to come out who's using it, but they come out, they go, "Oh, sorry," you go, "Oh yeah, no worries," and in you go, and you go back to the venue. I do think there's an element of, let's be honest, we don't go to the toilet in the same way that other people do, and I can understand how, whether your toilet routine is really simple from a disabled person or whether it's really complicated, I think that element of privacy is something we all, to some element, like, and I think it's not unreasonable for us to expect it.
Mm-hmm.
People of a different, if we take it outside of disability, people with a certain religious belief, they have their own rituals, in the world, and priorities and needs, and they're met and nobody questions them. So it's just another characteristic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think if we look at what we're up against, so policymakers and decision makers, do you think we're going to be able to see a change of mindset in the near future? Do you think people are doing enough work to challenge the way things are being done to try and make them better?
So obviously in the UK, there's been, I think, 30 or 300 million that's being put across to put in more change in places toilets, but it's you have to request the funding rather than it being pushed out to you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's still not I think in Ireland at the moment they're trying to get it as part of the new standard, and in the EU that we're no longer part of, they're looking at it being part of the new building regs standards. The trouble is, in smaller venues, it takes up a lot of space to have a really large, accessible change in places type facility. But that doesn't mean that it's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It just means that it's difficult. I don't think toilets though is the only element of this. I think it's only one part of the story,
Mm-hmm.
and by that I mean, if I take where I live in a small town in Cambridgeshire, you'll see many a restaurant be taken over by somebody new, and they spend £20,000-30,000 painting it, new tables, new chairs, new lighting, new signage, but the step still remains. And you're like, well, how is that allowed to be? If you're going to invest that amount of money in renovating something, surely there should be a time in the world now where we say you have to be making your establishment accessible, or they're given grants to make them accessible, or even giving them money to put a temporary portable ramp. I know that's not utopian. I'm sort of digressing away from toilets here, but I think to answer your question, there isn't enough being done. There should be more, I guess, criteria around things like that. And I think it's the same in housing, in accessible housing. The documents, the guidance, and I'm not an expert on all the, although I work in some of this stuff, I rely on experts for all the BS 900 and something numbers that they have to quote, but they're still going on the size of a manual wheelchair or a very basic electric wheelchair from the 1990s for a turning circle, when in reality the world is 30 years on from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that seems to be a case across the board. I know that we're digressing a little bit in terms of bathrooms, but another way to highlight what Ross has just shared is I was recently involved in a discussion with some people around the bus transit system. And when you look at some of the documentation around buses and the data that they have, the disabled community are not being allocated as passengers. We are allocated as luggage on a bus, we don't count as an individual passenger, we count as a piece of luggage. And I think that's testament to an archaic way of thinking, and people not really involving people from the disabled community in even just talking to them about the policies and the changes that they want to make. And I think that's why we're still stuck, as you say, in a design from the 90s. If I look at, you were talking about the funding that was available. I know that there were 500 new ones that are going to be built, because, as you say, some of the councils actually did apply for the funding. But having a discussion with someone else in that space, there were quite a lot of councils who didn't apply. Why do you think that is?
I don't want to do all the talking. I'm trying to give Chaz so I can go off. But I'm happy to. I'm happy. It's lack of awareness. So councils are run by generally more from my own experience, they're older generation of people who come from a different mindset. So they're not aware. They're not aware of the need. They're not aware of the problem. And not again related to toilets, but just a slight digress. But I guess it's the same principle. Is that I think I know enough about both of you. I just think that you've probably got a similar mindset to me, that we're quite keen to just crack on with life. We don't really want SMA to be something that holds us back. But if you take flying, for example, it's the most inclusive experience, yet I go on holiday 3 times a year and give airlines my money, the full fare value that the person sitting next to me has paid, who gets a much better end experience. So unless, and I'm not really one for chaining myself to the door of a restaurant or a train like they did in the 1960s, but if we continue to go and spend our money and make our own adaptations to enjoy ourselves, there's no need to change. But the trouble is, we're only 20% of the population, and therefore 80% of people are still giving a lot of people revenue.
That's a fair comment. I think I would challenge that a little bit and say that yes, we might be 20%, but we have a lot of money to spend.
Yeah.
So I think it should be taken in consideration. And you're right. It's down to a lack of awareness, and a lack of wanting to listen, I think, as well.
I mean, like if you take, I don't know, if you take the stance of the war at the moment and the way the world has reacted to Russia, so big chains have pulled out of Russia because they don't believe in what's going on, and rightly so. If everybody in the world with SMA said, we're not going to go to McDonald's ever again until you start putting changing places in all of your toilets, that might be the kind of thing that would do it. But everyone, when they're a bit drunk, loves a McDonald's. So, it's a hard one to not do. And if you're on a motorway, so it's the only option.
Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying? That, like something like that, you need to look at some of the movement. If we look at some of the BLM stuff, the Black Lives Matter, it's made a difference. Maybe the disabled community need to come together and start boycotting one large national, multinational, worldwide chain and encourage them to adapt their way. And then what you'll find is others follow. So if you look at the change in places rollout in the UK, the Premier League, funnily enough, are one of the big organisations who started putting them in all of their grounds. And then Tesco's took the following and decided to put 150 change in places facilities in their stores. And they're a huge, the third largest retailer in the world. I think Tesco's one of them. So we've got to make somebody make a difference, then there'll be a domino effect.
I think that's a valid point. I think maybe that's something that can come up in a future episode about advocacy and doing the right thing and helping those who want to make a difference make that difference. I think that's definitely something to cover in another episode.
This brings an end to part 2. Please stay tuned for part 3, where we will be discussing shared spaces, bathrooms, queue jumping and ignorance, and feeling like a burden.
You've been listening to the Living with SMA podcast. We hope you can join us again next time, but in the meantime, please don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. You can find out more on our website at smauk.org.uk.